Welcome to Where Did I Put That? Organizing Your Genealogy Research. My name is Rebecca Novi. I'm the owner of Novi Genealogy. I've been working on my own personal research for about 25 years or so and love genealogy. So when I retired from teaching a few years ago, I decided to start my own business. I now own Novi Genealogy and I work with clients on a variety of projects. I have 2 professional learning certificates from the National Institute for Genealogical Studies. I'm working towards genealogical certification. Not quite there yet, but I'm working on it. So welcome. And let's talk about how organizing your genealogy can help you be more effective and efficient in your research. All right, let me share my screen with you here. All right, in the beginning, there was paper. Now, you can see lots of paper here, but I guarantee this is not what my paper looked like when I really started organizing what I was doing. There were piles and piles of unfiled papers on tables and boxes and baskets. They were everywhere. But this is after a lot of organization has happened. If you don't get organized, you're going to waste time looking for a document or some information that is somewhere in the pile. You're going to duplicate your research efforts. You're going to forget that you have found certain documents or certain pieces of information, or you just can't find it. And you have a lot of information, but you don't know how it all fits together because it's all scattered throughout your pile or piles and boxes and baskets. Getting organized, first of all, helps you know what you have. You won't go back and look for it again because you already know it. It helps you evaluate your sources and judge their reliability. Is a birth certificate better reliable information for someone's birth than their death certificate? It's going to help you identify discrepancies. If you have found 3 or even 4 different birth dates for a person, now you know you have to figure out which one is the most likely to be correct. It helps you draw reasonable conclusions because you have all of your information at your fingertips. It helps you keep on track with your research, helps you avoid duplicating your research, and helps you find your documents. First of all, there's no one right way to organize your research. Do what works and is comfortable for you. The only right organizational system is the one that you will use. When I set up my organization, I cherry-picked bits of ways of doing things from several different people's organizational systems. I didn't find one that was just right for me. So I pulled a little of this and a little of that from different people's samples. First decision you may want to make is, are you going to use folders or binders? Personally, I use folders. I have 2 4-drawer filing cabinets full of genealogy. If I had to put them all in binders, I don't think I'd have room for them in my office. But that is entirely a personal decision. Whatever works better for you. As you can see, the picture on the right is somebody else's very nicely done binders that works for them. How will you file your documents? Before you can decide on a filing system, think about how you are going to be looking for a document. Are you going to be looking for it by surname, by date, location, type of document? How do you want to look for things? Most people, most systems start with the surname because if you've got 4 file cabinets worth, you don't want to have to go through 8 drawers worth of information to find what you want. So you're going to put, for example, different surnames in different drawers. And so you narrow it already down to 1 drawer. So when I first started, I simply organized by surname. Everything that was a Bean surname went in the Bean folder. Everything from the Hendersons went in the Henderson folder, and so on. And if you're just getting started or don't have a whole lot, maybe that's a good way for you to start. Once you organize into surname files, you may want to break it down, particularly when you get larger and larger amounts of paperwork, in some way so that you don't have to look through all of the Myers papers to find what you're looking for. Some people organize by type of document. All the Myers births go in one folder. All the Myers marriages would go in another folder. Myers deaths in another one, and so on. Some people would organize by location. The Beans that are in Marion County, Tennessee would have their own folder. The Beans in Marshall County, Alabama have another folder. The Beans from Itawamba County, Mississippi have another folder. And the Beans from Cook County, Texas would have another one. I decided that wasn't going to work for me because my Bean family moved about every 20 years. Every generation they moved further west. And so you might have the same family that was in all of those different counties over the course of their lifetime. So that didn't work for me. If you had a family that stayed put, my Myers family was in Summit County, Ohio for 200 years. That might be a logical way to organize for that group. Some people organize by couple or family, and therefore you would go Robert Reese Myers and Edna Sue Penick, my parents, would get a folder. Dwight Weaver Myers and Helen Beatrice Reese would get another folder. That's my grandparents. Charles Smith Myers and Stella Weaver would get a third folder. That's my great-grandparents. In many systems, an ancestral couples folder contains information on that couple and all of the information on their children, except for the next direct ancestor who gets their own folder. So in the previous slide, Charles Smith would contain, his folder would contain all of the information for Charles and Stella and all of their information except for the information on Dwight Weaver Myers. He would get his own folder because he's the next direct ancestor down. Mark each document, this is a tip, and I've learned this the hard way. Mark each document for easy filing before you put it into the to be filed pile. I usually make a notation in the top right corner. Maybe if you're doing location, you put Bean, Itawamba. If you're doing a couple, maybe you put Myers Reese. If you're doing types of documents, you might do Weaver, census. And that way you know exactly where it needs to be filed. Now, with my file system, I start with the surname. So all of the Myerses are in the same section of my file folder. I chose to number my ancestral couples by generation and give a separate folder to the siblings so that each of my direct ancestors has their own folder for that couple. But their siblings are in a different folder. After some discussions with my mother, we decided to number the generations, starting with my children's generation is generation 1. They're going to inherit all of this information when I die. So they're generation number 1. My parents would be, I would be generation 2. My parents are generation 3. My grandparents generation 4. And I do this because I have some lines in which I have multiple ancestors with the same name. I have, I think, 12 different Russell Beans, 2 or 3 of which are my direct ancestors. And in order to keep them in order in my file folder, it's a lot easier if I have the generation name on there. I don't have to remember which Russell Bean is which generation. So I number my generations here. So for example, my grandparents, Dwight Weaver Myers and Helen Beatrice Reese, are generation 4. I also have a generation 4 folder for Dwight's brothers and sisters. Generation 5, I have my great-grandparents, Charles Smith and Stella Weaver. And I have a folder for generation 5 for Charles' siblings. Just that way, if I'm working on them, I know where they are, but they're sort of out of the way if I'm working on my direct ancestors. So this is what my folders look like. In this case, I have generations 7, 8, and 9 folders here. Catherine, Adeline, Click, and Daniel Weaver, and then Catherine's siblings. Go back a generation, you have Samuel Click and Julia Kuntz, which are Catherine's parents. Catherine's parents. And then Samuel's siblings. And then Samuel's father, Samuel, It's generation 9. As you can see, having those generation numbers makes it a lot easier to put my Samuels back in order. Something else I learned the hard way, this is on a sibling folder. When you have a family that has 12 different children, you're going to end up with a lot of siblings with different surnames, particularly for all of those that have a lot of girls. And I can't always remember which folder, for example, the Strausers would go in. So on the outside of the folder, I've written in the surnames that go in that folder. And that has made it much easier when I go to file those papers. Tip. Now this is a case of do as I say, not do as I do. Try to get into a routine and schedule time to file or organize. For example, if you file all your documents once a week, your pile is never going to get too big. It won't take you long to file your papers. I'm not always very good at that, but it would be a great idea, something I should do. All right, let's say you already have tons of papers, piles and boxes and baskets, and you look at it and it's so overwhelming that instead of working on it, you just go back to researching because that's more fun anyway. I'm going to teach you how to break it down into some manageable chunks and make it not quite such a scary job. First of all, sort your documents into piles by surname. You got a pile for your Beans and a pile for your Myers, pile for Penick, whatever surnames you've been working on. Then put all but one of those piles aside. Just look at one surname at a time. Take that surname and sort it out again depending on how your folders are set up. If they're set up by couple, sort it by couple. If you're set up by location, sort by location. And this is where those labels in the top corner would come in handy. If you don't have to stop and think, you can just look at the corner, and if it says Dwight Myers and Helen Beatrice Reese or Myers Reese, they just boom, 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 go into that pile. Or sort by document type, depending on how you have your system set up. Now, I will say that while I have mine set up by families, I also sometimes have couples that are folders that may say Reese births, because I may have a page from a book that has births for 50 Reeses. And rather than making copies for each of the Reeses that I have in that list, I just have one for those multiple Reeses. And then number 3, put your documents in the correct file. Go on to your next surname, repeat as needed. Other documents that you may want to have in your folder or your binder would be a pedigree chart, help you keep track of how they fit within your ancestry, who are their ancestors. You may want a family group sheet, help you keep track of all of the members of that family. So in this case, for Samuel Click and Magdalena, his wife, family group sheet, and then I have all of the children listed with their spouses and dates within that folder. The siblings that are not my direct ancestors, remember, in my system are in a separate folder, but I have all the information in the parent couples folder on who their children are. I also have created a research checklist that kind of helps me keep up with what I know about each individual couple. So in this case, Samuel and Magdalena, I have in their birth information for Samuel. I don't know who his parents are. I only know he was born in Pennsylvania. So those parts are mostly blank. His wife, Magdalena, I know even less about. Then death information. I have a place to record where they were during each of the censuses in their lifetime. I can see whether I have them all or not. I have spaces for birth, marriage, and death records, and what kinds of records I have for each one of those. For example, with the marriage, do I have the actual marriage certificate? Do I have a marriage license? Do I know who performed the marriage? Sometimes that's significant. Do I have a newspaper clipping that mentions their marriage? Did they get divorced? Or did I just get it from a marriage index? Similar types of things for death records. Do I have an actual death certificate? Do I have any funeral home records or know what funeral home handled the services and such? Do I have their obituary? I love obituaries, they're great. Do I know what cemetery they're buried in? Do I have a picture of their headstone? Are they on Find a Grave? and so on. Also have information for probate, if they're in city directories, land records, military records, immigration records. In this case, you'll note on immigration records, it says NA. Samuel was not an immigrant, so I'm not going to look for immigration records because there aren't any. Then there's some other information that you can't see on this form, but it helps me know what I have and what perhaps I should look for. Once you've dealt with your paper, you need to be looking at your digital files as well. More and more people are going to digital more than paper. And while I absolutely love paper, I love to be able to get out the folder and here's all my papers, I am working towards going digital with an awful lot of my records. I'm overflowing. I don't have room for more. So I'm working on scanning and digitizing my records. Your digital file organization should mirror your paper file organization system. If they're set up the same way, it's going to be a lot easier to find your digital files than if you have a totally different system. All right, before you start, think about how you're going to name your files. And here are some kind of rules that you need to think about. Eliminate special characters. Don't use parentheses and exclamations and stars and whatever else. Computers frequently use those for other purposes, and it may confuse your computer. Avoid spaces whenever possible. Use underlines and dashes. Shorter names are better. If you put in a date, put it in as year, month, then day. Then when your records sort, they sort in chronological order. Put in locations as country, state, county, and then town. Names should be put in surname first, followed by the given name. But the most important thing about your naming is be consistent. Your computer is only going to sort the way you put things in. And if you're not consistent with how you name them, it may not put them in the order you think it's putting them in, making it more difficult to find your files. All right, my digital filing structure. First of all, I start with a folder labeled Genealogy. And everything having to do with genealogy goes in that genealogy folder. Within that, I have folders for my dad's side of the family, my mom's side of the family, my husband's family. I have one for forms. That's where I put blank forms for censuses, for family group sheets, pedigrees, research logs, whatever kinds of forms I might want. I have a folder for articles that I run across on the internet that I want to save. I save them to that folder. I have some that are location-based, so that if I have general information about researching in Mississippi, it goes in the Mississippi folder. Because I have several lines that were in Mississippi. So I have a folder just for Mississippi research, not for research on specific people in Mississippi, but information on Mississippi repositories, Mississippi history, that type of thing. And then I have one for, of course, Novi genealogy for my business records. All right, within my husband's family, I have a folder for each of the main surnames. This group of people came from the area that's now the Czech Republic, so we get some really fun names that I don't even know how to say, but I have one for each surname. Within, say, the Senator surname, I have a folder for each generation direct ancestors. So 3 is my husband's mother, Julia Senator. And you'll notice on her name it says Senator, that's her maiden name, Julia Marie, but then I put Novi, which is her married name. And the reason for that is, otherwise, sometimes you forget who they married, or you have multiple people with the same name. I have several Mary Myerses. And if I add the women's married name, it helps me to keep track of them. Then I have her father, Martin James Senator, his father, Vaclav Wenceslas Senator, his father, Martin, his father, Jan, and so on. You'll note I also have one that says Senator Unidentified. I suspect all of the Senators, certainly in the Cleveland area, are related. It's an unusual surname, but I don't know how those particular Senators fit into the family. Within within Martin's folder, I have a folder for 3 of his 4 children. You notice they're labeled A, B, C, D, or they would be if the A was there. That puts them in birth order. A is not there because A was his mother, Julia, who has her own folder. And then I have records that are Martin Sonatter's records, draft registration, deaths, and so on. I haven't gone through and digitized all of his records, so there's not a whole lot. But you notice I put the name first, and it's all consistent how you put in the name, the surname, first name, etc. Those are connected by dashes. Then I put an underline before the date. Dates go year first, and then it sorts them so they would be in chronological order, and then a description of what type of record it is. So here's my examples of how to name your files. Surname, first name, middle name, connected by dashes. Underline before you get to the next section, which is the date. It could be simply a year. Sometimes that's all you know. It could be a specific date, followed by an underline, and then a description. Any pieces of the description are connected with dashes. Tip, implement your system little by little. As you start using it, you may tweak it and find that you want to add some information, take out some information, just do it differently. And that's okay. So do it little by little. Use the system with new files before you take the time to go back and rename all the old files. Because if you go back when you first start, rename all your old files, then use it for a while and say, I want to change something about it. Now you have to go back and change all your old files again. So just do it a little by little. Start with what you're doing, and so you get really comfortable with it. Tip, back up your digital files on a regular basis. Be sure that you have digital files in more than one location, such as on your computer, on an external hard drive, backed up to the cloud. Back in January, we had a small house fire. My fireplace caught on fire. Turned out to be small. It was contained to the living room, but all I could think was, what if I lose all my research? If you have your digital files in a variety of places, you're not going to lose everything. It has given me some impetus. I need to keep digitizing both my files as well as my photographs so that if something like that were to ever happen again, I know I'm not going to lose everything. Questions? If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at novigenealogy@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me.